we're next going to go to a panel led by Kim Curtin from Deloitte. Kim, also in a former life, used to be the hope of the side at Treasury, but then they conspired and took it to Deloitte. So she's the hope of the side for the next panel. We're going to talk about, in response to Rose's contribution, particularly working with both LAC and social housing developers to get that done. And I think please don't pass up the opportunity today. So we don't want to come together and have a whinge. We want to come together and find solutions. We've got a room full of local government, state government agents and regulators. We've got developers, financiers, CHPs, LAC itself. There are so many people in this room who care about this issue, who want to do something about this issue. In the break, cut a deal, finance a property, house some people. Become an advocate, tear down stupid rules, open up the debate. Do anything you can do. Do anything except sit here and whinge today, and let's get together. And true crises require solutions. We hope we have a platform to do it. Importantly, you can start that by using the Slido, because Kim's going to take some questions from the floor as well. So please welcome our provocateur, Kim Curtin from Deloitte.
Thanks, Chris. Good to see you, everyone. Can I ask the panellists to come up? So we've got 3 people joining me today. Scott Langford, CEO of St George Community Housing. There's some stairs in the middle. Trina Jones, our New South Wales Rental Commissioner. And Michael Wheatley, Acting Chief Executive of Land and Housing Corporation. Anyway. So I did want to say thank you to the Honourable Rose Jackson for bringing your passion today. I'd like to invite our panellists now to bring their passion. I know they're very passionate about the areas they cover, so let it fly. So to kick off, and just a reminder, so as Chris said, the Slido, hopefully we'll put the Slido details up again so you'll be able to see if you didn't catch that before, but I do have the little iPad here. They'll be giving me all your questions, so please send them in. I've been given the title of Provocateur, so make them pointy questions. But to kick off with, I think I was chatting with quite a few people, but as we first sort of came in this morning, a lot of people from the not-for-profit sector, and I think Rose Jackson acknowledged that the New South Wales budget was just a beginning, but I think the feeling in the room was a little bit disappointed. So I thought I'd just throw over and get your thoughts on the New South Wales budget that's just released this week. So maybe Scott, I'll go to you first.
Thank you. Look, I think if we see the budget as a down payment, it's a positive start. Although someone did put it to me yesterday, the one critique that couldn't be offered is it's not going to be inflationary when it comes to the construction of social and affordable housing. But I think, as the Minister outlined, it is the start of something, and if it is taken together with further reforms, we would hope that it begins to seed a different system, a structural shift, and I think we look forward to seeing the detail of that coming forward. Obviously, with the development of the federal sphere and the Housing Australia Future Fund, that's exciting, but if the answer is only half, I'm not sure what the question is. So there does need to be further work and reform, and I think greater level of partnership to really start to make structural shifts in the system.
Okay. Trina, anything you want to add?
Just to say that the budget has enabled my position to exist, and as the New South Wales Rental Commissioner, to echo Scott's comments, it's not just about one aspect, it's about all of the pieces that we can put together to drive change and deliver outcomes for people to have safe and affordable homes. So I really see this as an exciting start and an opportunity to build on the momentum that we're seeing nationally and partner to ensure that we can get the outcomes we need.
Thanks. Michael?
It's a great foundation. The establishment of Homes New South Wales, the commitment to start the capital maintenance, now that we're not selling houses to fund maintenance, and also some new initiatives for funding the acceleration of housing, social and affordable housing communities in the regions too. They're great things for us to start building and accelerating, delivering new homes and better homes.
So just on that, in terms of building in the regions as well versus in metro areas, sort of Trina, interested in your thoughts, particularly your your role now is representing renters, but also your previous role around homelessness and bringing all of that together. Sort of, I know that you've heard the narrative around, maybe we should build houses in a cheaper area to build, that sort of thing. Like, what's your reaction to that?
So my mandate is about fair, quality and affordable rental experience in New South Wales. For us to achieve that, we have to make sure that people can live where their communities are. If you are renting, which more people are doing, and they're doing for longer, you should be able to rent in places close to your job, close to transport, if you have caring responsibilities, schools. And those options should be available to you regardless of your income. And that's what makes stronger communities. So I'm a strong advocate for infill and medium density and looking at ways to maximise existing communities to ensure that people can continue to live where they want to live and reap the benefits of that.
So, Scott, we've seen your article in the AFR this morning, or seen you mentioned in that AFR, talking about mandatory inclusionary zones. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're advocating? What do we need to do to make it real? So to actually get real traction and, I guess, not just hit a sledgehammer, but work together as partners, which is the topic of our discussion today. How do we bring everyone along on the journey so that we actually get to somewhere meaningful with meaningful change?
Thanks, Kim. So this morning there was an article in the AFR which is about a report we're releasing today with Astrolab, which started with a scope looking at the headline announcement of the planning incentive for affordable housing in New South Wales, the 30% uplift of FSR for 15% affordable housing. And we went with a question of, well, does this work? And how do you take a pragmatic view? We start with a premise that developers are rational. That may be a controversial statement in some places, but probably not in this room. Developers are rational. They'll do things where it makes economic sense, where they will get remunerated for the risks they take, and perhaps, as the Minister said, not over-remunerated, but there is a balance point. When we started modelling some of the potential in New South Wales of that as an incentive, what we found is that the conditions that apply to that use of that instrument are critical. That the 30% uplift, there are restrictions if the conditions don't allow it to override local planning controls. That some of the fine-grained detail is going to be incredibly important into whether that is taken up at all. Now, it's a big incentive if we get it right, and it's a start. It's another down payment. It's using the planning lever. But what we also explored is that if you really want to start to create structural shift, and I think in this environment, if the development industry is going to retain the social licence with the community to continue to deliver great places, it is time for the conversation about inclusionary zoning, which would be introduced over time. Now, our view that we put forward is that bringing inclusionary zoning into the market with a 3 to 5 year transition period is appropriate. That a little bit like Australia's superannuation system, if you start with a smaller number, I think superannuation, compulsory superannuation started at 3%, we're proposing inclusionary zoning start at 5% of GFA and be increased over time, it can actually strengthen the model. And if there's a transitionary period, it allows developers to price it into the feasibility. The greatest enemy of feasibility is uncertainty, because you have to price risk. If we start to take risk out of the equation, partnerships can form, partnerships with government, partnerships with community housing. We can bring capital and capability together, and the planning system can be a key lever. It won't solve the whole problem, but if we're serious about tackling the problem, it's one of the big levers. We think it needs to be worked harder.
And is that where, Chris was just talking about we're in a crisis. Is that going to be fast enough?
Well, I think it's an and. I think that the bonus that's been promoted in New South Wales of 30% for 15% affordable housing is something that can be done in the short term. But the reality is that if you brought inclusionary zoning in immediately and mandated, it would kill feasibilities, and what that would do is kill supply. And the last thing anyone wants to do in this environment is kill supply. What we want is to support feasibility in a sensible transition, and it has to be complemented by other things. So the other levers that government has available, direct funding to support community housing providers, direct contributions, funding infrastructure, initiatives like the Housing Australia Future Fund, these things need to work together to complement so that things can be layered up, and that means we can make a big enough start.
Trina, Michael, any addition?
We know that one of the things that we need to do is increase housing supply. And when we think about how can we achieve that, I agree that mixed tenure developments and ways that we can ensure stronger and more diverse communities are one of the opportunities. With mixed tenure developments, we want to ensure certainty. One of the things that we can achieve through certainty is, for example, pre-sale opportunities through social and affordable housing that can help developers to guarantee their finance, because we know that the delivery and supply of housing is not all about the DAs, right? We know that there's 75,000 homes approved to be built every year in New South Wales, residential dwellings, and about 35,000 or just over get built. And so it's not always just about the planning system, although I agree with Scott that that's a major reform lever. So getting planning to sing along with opportunities for finance and to sing along with diverse and resilient communities, I really believe is the way that we'll achieve this. From my perspective, I'm very interested in the opportunities for institutional investment, not only just with superannuation, but also through housing funds or housing bonds, and ways that we can look at bringing in diverse funds to ensure we can deliver housing that's affordable for those who need it. And all of those reforms can contribute to more certainty to help attract that investment.
So hopefully there's some questions there, but my Slido says the event doesn't exist, so maybe someone who can come and fix the Slido for me. But while we're waiting for that, Michael, one question that I've heard also discussed today is, what is the role of government? So what do you see as the role government should be playing in this crisis?
In lax space,
Sure.
it's definitely social housing and working with the sector for affordable housing as well. We've got to be looking at all areas, pulling all levers. Obviously planning, we all know what government's role is there. In terms of the delivery of housing from our perspective, we have land and we have it all over the state, and we are here to partner. We've got to work with the community housing sector to really partner, bring what we can bring to the partnership, which is often land, and help create that supply. So all levers have to be pulled, and we have to look at everything that we can do.
I think some commentary I'm hearing is the role of government to compete against developers, or is it to enable? I don't know. So I think let's be interested in the thoughts of the others on the panel as well, in terms of what is that role of government, besides just, obviously, we've got a great narrative at the moment, which is awesome. We've got funding coming in, which is awesome. So take both of those definite big ticks. A very passionate minister, which is also awesome. Where do we go next, though, Trina?
I would say, let's not gang up on each other. Let's gang up on the problem. It's not about who can race to the finish line. It's a relay. How can we hand the baton to each other, not how can we compete to the end. It's actually about what's the sum of what we can do as a collective, which is why I think everyone in this panel is a strong advocate for, the opportunities for mixed tenure developments and what that can bring, and the partnerships that can bring. And so my call to action would be if we want to see affordable rental supply in the market, the only way that we can get that is through partnership, so that we can have the social, affordable and private housing options so that people can actually afford to live in their communities. We know that housing is the foundation of good health, education and stronger communities, and without that we all lose. And so there's no need to pit the developers against community housing. It's actually about saying, what are the opportunities for us to work together, and what can we each bring to the table to make sure that what we contribute is better than anything we can do on our own.
I think it's about partnering, and the scale of the challenge and the opportunity in front of us means that it requires the best of all sectors and partners. I think regulated community housing providers have a key role in providing a level of assurance about the operating outcomes and the quality of service for tenants. I think that's an and alongside the public housing system, and I think the Minister's comments this morning reflect that too. You've got to strengthen both. I don't think they should be pitted in competition. And we think that there is a huge role for the development industry. Let the development industry get on with what they're good at, which is creating great places. There is a role for government at times in taking elements of risk that means that the development industry can deliver more efficiently. You know, if the minister's mantra is that she wants to make it efficient, she's not driven by anybody making money, that's great, but there are roles that government can absolutely play that means that industry can deliver more efficiently, can price less risk, and that ultimately means more keys indoors. So I think we can reconceptualise how everybody plays along the spectrum and through partnering get better outcomes.
Anything else to add, Michael, on that one? All good? So our top question for you all at the moment is, will we meet the socio-economic outcomes of the housing scale challenge at the expense of net zero?
From the rental perspective, I'm very focused on making sure that we have quality homes. And quality means not only that we meet minimum standards, but into the future we can lead on energy efficiencies, because we need to not only ensure that housing is affordable to access, but affordable to live in. And we know, particularly for renters right now, many of them are in substandard accommodation that is negatively impacting their health and their well-being. And so for me, from the perspective of the opportunities for the triple bottom line, if you like, the economic, the environmental and the social outcome, it's imperative that we actually invest in energy efficiencies into the future. And that's something that I'm already working on in my first 8 weeks in the role, alongside the Building Commissioner and our colleagues in the Office of Energy and Climate, because we know that this is a critical pillar for the future of stronger communities and better homes. So I don't think that they're at a cost. Again, I think we have to lift our ambitions and challenge ourselves to meet multiple goals.
I agree. They go hand in hand, and often it is quite linked to affordability as well. Energy prices into the future. We are actively looking at how we can invest in programs that contribute to net zero, whether it's solar, whether it's all those energy-related items as well, that will assist with affordability as well as bringing a better outcome for the tenants in their houses.
If I can add, I think it's an easier equation in new build, and the bigger challenge is a lot of the existing property. We have a real challenge around the split incentive, but on new build, I think not only is it being driven because it's the right thing to do, there's also an inflow. If we are to succeed, we need institutional capital, and that will demand a better standard of asset so that you don't end up with marooned assets in the future. You know, for example, we've got a partnership with AXA IM. We're doing a 400-unit project in Westmead. It'll be carbon neutral in operation, 5-star Green Star. That is because AXA have a global standard, and it demands that we move to that. So I think the horizon shifts, and I actually think it will incentivise better outcomes rather than stand as a barrier.
Okay, so switching now to the role of community-led initiatives. I think there's actually quite a few people in the room who'd sort of like to know what's their role, such as cooperatives, in the model for affordable housing.
Again, I think it comes back to, great, put it in the mix. Like, if we can have mixed tenure developments, if we can have different types of models in the community, well then why not? My call to action to this group would be partner up, because it's time to get to work.
Michael, did you want to add? Oh.
Absolutely. We've got to look at all ways to partner, to work together, and we all bring different things to the mix, and we've got to bring and contribute in all forms and look at all ways to work to get more affordable housing into the mix.
Okay. I think just recognising that we've got Trina here and you're representing, I think you're the main person representing renters today, so I want to make sure I pick up this question. With rental vacancies below 1% across Sydney, as such, renters are sort of finding it sort of difficult. The question is, what is New South Wales doing to represent broader renters in the market?
I'm glad that you asked that question. We have a number of priorities that are set out in front of us right now. We recently held a Have Your Say on improving rental laws in New South Wales. It actually broke records. We had over 16,000 survey responses and over 400 submissions. And I'm still making my way through all of those submissions. I'm determined to read all of them, including the complaints that are coming in, because it keeps you connected to the issues that people are dealing with day in, day out in their homes. And what we saw from those responses and through our reforms is, right now, people don't feel like they have any security in their homes. They don't feel like they can make decisions about where they're going to live. Sending kids to school. I don't know what school I'm going to send my little one to because I don't know where I'm going to live. And that's because we have in New South Wales right now no grounds evictions. And that is undermining the foundational rights in the broader Residential Tenancies Act. And so my number one priority right now is to ensure that we can end no grounds evictions and we can create certainty for property providers and tenants to know what are the reasonable grounds that you can end a tenancy, and ensure that the notice periods are there for people to plan and access homes, particularly in settings where we've got such low vacancy rates. We're also looking at how can you make a house your home. I said already, more people are renting and will be renting for their whole lives. Renting is no longer just the rite of passage, the thing you do before you buy. I think we need to shift our mindset, and it's part of my aspiration that one of the things that we can redefine is renting as a major pillar of strong economies and communities. Start to think of renting as a major pillar in our housing options, so that it's a genuine choice of tenure. It's a genuine choice. It's not the second choice because you couldn't buy, okay? It's a genuine option for people. And it's also a genuine opportunity for investment and viability. And the answer to this is, you can't have a tenant without a landlord, and you can't have a landlord without a tenant. So I'm also very interested to make sure that we can rebalance some of the power dynamics there and make sure that we can strengthen renters' rights and we can ensure opportunities for investment in the rental market to make it a genuine option into the future, and make sure that people can make the houses they're in their home.
Yeah, great, thank you. So one for you, Michael. The issue of maintenance has been raised already this morning. So what's LAC doing in the maintenance space?
One of the key things that we are doing is to renegotiate and reset all our maintenance contracts. In the theme of partnership, it is very important that we partner with the maintenance industry. We're resetting all our agreements under a new model that is going to be more responsive. It is about two things. It is about delivering a better experience for the tenants of our homes, and also improving the quality of our homes. That's the foundation of the new maintenance agreements. We will be setting up a call centre that is staffed actually by LAC staff rather than the contractors themselves, so we're taking on that responsibility. The other thing that is acknowledged and was talked about by the Minister, that we used to sell houses to fund maintenance. That is stopped, and so the government is now ramping up the funding for the improvement capital maintenance programs. We are looking at a program, and we're rolling out restorations and improvements over thousands of homes over the next 2 or 3 years. So there is real money coming into improving our stock, looking at our portfolio, and with the new maintenance contracts that are going to be more directly responsive to tenants and more streamlined in terms of delivering those improvements in homes, we are starting that journey to improve our portfolio. And we do annual surveys of all our portfolio on a rolling cycle. We assess about a third of our 100,000 homes a year, and it just keeps rolling on. And based on that, we target the needs of the homes that are needing upgrades and restorations. They're all the things that we are actively doing, but there is a lot more to be done.
Absolutely. So the next question, how can government, or how should they, incentivise developers in horizontal built communities to be able to, and particularly as being developed in Western Sydney, rather than just always thinking about vertical? Who wants to go first?
Planning and infrastructure. I think there are obvious pathways in creating efficiencies in planning, and also already talked about potentially some of the overlays that may be there around bonuses that allow different solutions. But I think infrastructure is the other key. As Trina was saying, we want to provide housing in places where there is access to good infrastructure. So accelerating the spending and relieving the burden, the expectation that every greenfield development is going to pay for every piece of infrastructure that community needs up front creates a significant burden on the feasibility. Government has the power to shift that equation, can do it in partnership with local government and think about how that's shared across the broader community over a longer period of time.
So when you say infrastructure, what are you meaning? What's the minimum that you need?
Well, road, water, electricity, I think, bit of running water. But I think there's also the elements of social infrastructure. So creating greenfield communities without access to schools, without access to healthcare, the things that the Minister spoke about this morning, there needs to be greater government investment in the upfront capital costs of that to defease that over the broader community over a longer period.
Trina?
I would agree with Scott. I think there's really a need to think holistically about the quality of the communities that we are developing and ensuring that we can get the balance right to make sure that we don't end up with, islands of housing or without access to transport or infrastructure, any of the things that make a quality community. And to echo the Minister's comments this morning, we will get better community support if we can develop better communities. And so to achieve that, nobody can do it on their own. And without continually going over it, I cannot stress this enough. It really is about asking yourself, not to say, oh, that target is not achievable or that's way too much, that's double what we build now. Actually, there's a lot of smart people in the room. You already will be all having a chat over the coffee break or the lunch about what needs to be done. We'll bring those solutions together and bring them to myself, my colleagues in government, and so we can work together to deliver what we know we need, which is stronger, more connected communities where people have homes.
Beautiful segue to the next question. So mentioning we've got a lot of really smart people in the room. If we all put our heads together seriously, and Michael, feel free to step outside of your lack function at the moment, we're among friends. Is it possible for affordable housing to be solved without government funding and government intervention?
That's a very interesting question. I believe yes. It is a question of what is right for our community, what is right for our society. We do have a real societal issue about affordability of where people need to live to access the work, and I think we all collectively need to do that. The tools are there, the foundations are there. I think how we do it is a big issue. But affordable housing does not need to be loss-making. These challenges need creative people, creative solutions. The finance is coming in. Once the market and the size of the market gets up to a certain scale, I think we can find the investment at a reasonable return to actually make affordable housing unreliant on subsidy.
Thanks.
How? I don't know.
I think that's a very polite answer, Michael. I think there's certain laws of physics, and former Treasury official, but people in Treasury have been obsessed with trying to bend the laws of physics to say, how do you do affordable and social housing without subsidy? You can't do a sub-market product without subsidy, either explicit or explicit. It needs some intervention in the market. So I think we've got some projects we've done with Lighthouse Infrastructure, for example. We come up with a structured solution. We can deliver affordable housing to a cohort for 10 years. It's affordable for someone because it makes use of some of the indirect benefits that are available to community housing providers. But if we're talking about affordable for lower income households, the volume of market product that would have to be delivered and the resulting fall in house prices, I would suggest is unlikely to get any government re-elected if we're going to increase supply, nor would any rational developer chase down prices to that point. I do think we can make it a lot more efficient. I think we can reduce the need at certain price points and certain cohorts of the market for direct government subsidy. I do believe that we can do affordable housing for moderate income households in higher value locations using some of the indirect benefits. And I do believe that as we see a larger inflow of institutional capital, we can normalise some of the product into a blended market solution. But I think there is a reality, and I would strongly urge colleagues in government, and particularly central government, to understand the principal challenge, which is subsidised housing needs a subsidy.
Do you want to add?
I'd just add to that I really think that we need to be realistic about what's required to ensure that we can deliver homes for people. And also, affordable housing shouldn't be set up to be a profit-making entity. And so it's important that, and that's a principle, that's a value that we need to hold, because the minute that we start to try to make, huge earnings or earnings on it, while it can, they should always subsidise the ones that we can't make earnings on, like social housing. So that's not some idealist view. That's the reality of the situation, that without partnership, which includes subsidy of some kind, whether it's a tax incentive, whether it's a land subsidy, whether it's a partnership, whether it's a grant, whatever that might look like, at this stage where we're at right now in New South Wales, I do think we need to partner. I take Michael's point. In other countries in the world, they're at a bigger scale. There can be things that can be achieved to make affordable housing more viable and stack up on its own. But I would also reflect that often those returns are directly reinvested back into social housing because they're generally delivered by community housing providers. So I think there's a strong role for CHBs to continue to deliver affordable housing as a product of home, but there's opportunity to work with private investors and the government to work together to make sure that even if the subsidy is land because it's a mixed tenure development, or the subsidy is social infrastructure because we've got a build to rent on the site, or whatever it might be, I think that we shouldn't seek to split these things out and keep them away from each other. We should seek to maximise resource investment.
One thing I was going to add is that it's similar to the sustainability issue that 20 years ago or 25 years ago. The industry said you can't build sustainable buildings economically. You can't do it. It costs money. And the industry set out to prove that you could actually do that. There were sustainable buildings were delivered under entirely commercial feasibilities, and they worked out a way to do it. Now it is just part of delivering all development, sustainability. And so affordability, if you look at the inclusionary zoning idea, if it becomes part of the industry and there is a base level, it is part of the developments, then it eventually weaves its way into that's the way the industry works. And so to me, there is a seed of an idea or potential in there somehow.
I mean, if it's about normalising it into industry practice, I absolutely agree. I think those structural things like inclusionary zoning and other incentives in the planning system, they are a form of intervention from government to create the product, but it's an indirect subsidy. And I think those things, if they're in place, yes, absolutely, the development industry can deliver and make a reasonable risk-adjusted return on that sort of product in future.
So if you're reading the papers and the general commentary, I think people who aren't involved in the housing crisis would think all we have to do is build more houses and it will solve the problem. And one of the questions that has come up is around the wraparound services and the importance of that, and inviting you to add comment. So Trina, I know this is something you're passionate about, but the importance of having that balance.
Yeah, I would say that we know from the evidence that it's not just about more supply, it's the type of supply and where the supply is as well in another factor. We have to make sure that when we think about making sure that we have affordable housing and housing that is affordable, so social and affordable housing, and even private rental housing that's affordable for people, the ways to achieve that are not by just flooding the market with housing, because we know that there are certain settings that will even if we have the properties, they may remain vacant, they may remain not sold, they may remain unaccessed for various reasons. What I am passionate about and have been a long-standing advocate for in this role and prior to this role is investment in social and affordable housing. And the reason that is because we know that that investment in that type of tenure can lift affordability across all other types of tenure. And so for me, that is the silver bullet, if you like, even though we know in housing there's no such thing. But if we think about the heavy hitter or the big leverage point, investment in social and affordable housing is the way to get long-term affordability in the market overall. And so that's something that I'm very passionate about. And we know that the people who are in social housing now and the people who are renting are really doing it tough. The cost of living crisis is putting people under enormous pressure. And we see people who are too afraid to raise concerns with their landlords because they don't want to be evicted and they don't want to see their rents rise. And this is something that I'm very aware of, and I'm working alongside my colleagues to make sure that we can strengthen the laws to protect renters' rights and enable them to use their voice and use their rights under the current law and strengthen the law so that they can actually ensure that their houses, their homes and their tenancies are secure. And when you have that, then you can seek support and advocacy to make sure that your house has the right standards, to make sure that you can access what you need. Because without that safe place to call home, it's very hard for people to access the supports that they might actually require. There's good programs that are out there to support people, but we know that it's not always enough. And this is something that's impacting people's risk in the rental market and also beyond. So it's something that's very close to my heart. I'm very aware of it, and I'm working alongside my colleagues to make sure that not only do we have safe and affordable rental homes, but that people can link into the supports in their communities.
So I have one final question for all of you. Thinking about the next, say, 5 years and what the biggest challenges are, if we could wave our magic wand and fix one thing that would have the greatest impact, what's the thing that you think is the greatest challenge? If we could fix that, that would have the best impact for the next 5 years. Who wants to go first?
More funding.
Just money, 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 money.
That was a nice handball. I was hoping to go at the end there. You've taken money, Michael. Certainty, which comes from, could various levels of government stop having brainwaves that come out as a new initiative, a pilot program, a different way of doing things, and we get some consistency. Let's eject the pilot and just get a bit of consistency. The inefficiency in housing born out of so many different ways to create interventions in the market is wasting a lot of resources that could be going into creating homes.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's about reimagining the rental market in New South Wales and thinking about how we can pool our resources to ensure that that is certain for not only tenants, but also for investors. So for me, in the next 5 years, if we could shift our mindsets to renting as a pillar of housing options and genuine tenure option, then I think that what we would start to see is change of investment types, the type of housing that's delivered, where it's delivered. And that means that we need to change our mindset from housing as an asset or housing as a commodity to housing as an essential service. And if we did that, I think we'd get a lot of outcomes.
Okay, can you please join me in thanking Michael, Trina and Scott? Okay.